The rain had just started tapping lightly against the windows of Ryan's apartment when the small brown envelope arrived. It was inconspicuous, no special markings, no bold type to signal its importance. Just his name, handwritten in neat block letters, and a studio logo in the corner. The return address was familiar, the wedding photography company he had worked so carefully to select. They were boutique, discreet, known for capturing joy without making it feel staged. He smiled when he saw it. A flicker of excitement stirred inside his chest, a rare thing these days. Dulled by weeks of planning, appointments, and the gentle pressure of making everything perfect. This envelope was a surprise. Something MIA hadn't known about. He had asked the studio to compile a digital album of her Bachelorette weekend. It was meant to be a keepsake, a visual love letter of the joy she shared with her closest friends before stepping into the life they were about to build. He poured a coffee, sat at his desk, and slid the USB drive into the port. The folder opened with a chime. A cascade of thumbnails unfolded across his screen, vibrant images of champagne toasts, poolside laughter, matching robes, and golden hour group shots that looked more like magazine editorials than candid moments. He clicked the first image. MIA, barefoot on a lounge chair, laughing with her whole face. Her hair caught in the breeze. She looked so alive in that moment, radiant in a way that made Ryan's breath catch. He kept clicking. Another photo, MIA dancing, arms thrown around her maid of honor. Then one with sparklers in the background, light catching the rim of her wine glass. A close-up of her smiling as someone whispered something in her ear. She was glowing, undeniably. He paused occasionally to screenshot the ones he loved. A frame-worthy smile here, a glance that felt intimate there. He was already imagining which ones he might print and frame. Something for her vanity, maybe one to keep at his office desk. But then he stopped. It wasn't sudden, it was a slow recoil. The way your eyes register a bruise beneath makeup. There, tucked between the high-energy group shots and the soft-lit portraits, was a photo that didn't belong. It was darker, less composed, as if it had been snapped quickly, without permission or rehearsal. MIA was sitting on someone's lap, her head tilted back slightly, eyes half-lidded. A man, tall, angular, his hand rested on her hip, thumb caught in the crease of her dress. Her gown had shifted, enough to reveal more thigh than taste would allow. Her smile in this photo was different. Not joyful, not wild. It was indulgent, daring. The man's face was turned toward hers. Their noses were nearly touching. Ryan stared at the image. He didn't click away, didn't zoom in, just sat there, his fingers slowly leaving the keyboard, like retreating soldiers after a battle already lost. His first instinct was confusion. Was this staged? A joke? A dare from one of the girls? MIA wasn't the type to flirt. Not really, and definitely not the type to let someone photograph it. But the timestamp told another story. He hovered the mouse over the image. 10:36 p.m. He flipped back to the photo before it. MIA standing poolside with her friends. 10:35 p.m. The next photo, her back with the group. 10:39 p.m. So this happened in between. And yet, no one else was in the frame. He looked at the file info. No watermark, no editing, the raw tag still attached. Whoever had snapped it didn't think to retouch it. Or perhaps they never intended it to be seen. But somehow, it ended up here. Ryan's mouth was dry. He scrolled back again, looking for the man's face. A few frames later, he found it. The photographer. He was in some of the early shots, behind the camera, helping someone pose, smiling with equipment slung over one shoulder. There was even one where MIA stood beside him, gesturing at the camera with mock seriousness, as if pretending to direct the shoot. In hindsight, that smile between them looked too easy, too familiar. Ryan leaned back in his chair. He wasn't angry, not yet. Anger requires belief, requires some expectation still clinging to the edge of your chest, ready to fight for what it once thought was true. But this was something else. This was the slow, cold unfurling of a truth that doesn't need to shout to be heard. He clicked the photo again. The one with her on his lap. Studied the lines of her body. The expression she wore. This wasn't a mistake. This was comfort. This was intention. He thought back to their recent conversations. MIA had been distracted lately, claiming it was wedding stress. She'd been short with him, skipping the calls they used to linger on, replacing intimacy with to-do lists. Still, he'd believed it was just the chaos of planning, of nerves. He never doubted her love. Until now. Because now, it stared back at him in pixels. A moment frozen in time. A secret hidden in the folder of memories he thought would make her smile. He didn't throw anything, didn't call her, didn't even stand up right away. He simply sat there, the image glowing on the screen, the rain growing louder outside, and realized he had looked into the soul of his marriage before it even began, and seen it blink. And in that blink, everything changed. Ryan stared at the photo again, the dim light of his laptop screen casting a faint bluish hue across his living room. The image hadn't changed. Of course, it never would, but something inside him had. There was a gravity to that frame, an emotional mass that bent everything else around it. It pulled at him in ways he didn't fully understand yet. The moment, frozen in a blur of color and breath and exposed skin, haunted the edges of his mind like a melody he couldn't forget. His cursor hovered again over the file. He opened the metadata panel. Timestamp, 10:36 p.m. His stomach clenched. The time wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't the end of the party, when everyone was too drunk to remember what they'd done. It wasn't a blurred midnight accident. It was 10:36, mid-event. Smack in the middle of the carefully planned Bachelorette itinerary that MIA had spent weeks refining. According to her shared Google Calendar, that exact time was meant to be a group game on the beach, something called Confessions in the Sand. A bonding activity. Ryan remembered her laughing about it, saying it was meant to bring the girls closer, that they'd all sit in a circle and answer outrageous questions while waves crashed nearby. He clicked the next photo. MIA, seated beside a bonfire, laughter captured in full bloom. Then another, showing a line of women running down the shore barefoot, their robes flying behind them. 10:34 p.m. Then came 10:35, MIA, mid-jump, arms up, silhouetted against the firelight. And then, 10:36 p.m. The man again. She was standing next to him now, her body angled just slightly toward his. The kind of subtle lean that didn't scream attraction but whispered familiarity. He was showing her something on the back of the camera. His hand brushed her elbow. Ryan clicked again. Another photo, this time, blurry, perhaps taken by accident. Mia's head thrown back in laughter, her hand on his chest. Timestamp, still 10:36. And then the photo, the one he had first seen. The one where she was on his lap. Her smile, a language Ryan had never learned. The timeline was forming, not just a moment, a sequence. He dragged the files into a new folder. One by one, he checked them. No edits, no masks, no shadows to hide behind. The truth, raw and irreversible, staring back with pixelated certainty. He scrolled forward. 10:37, MIA walking away from the photographer, her fingers still brushing his arm. Another guest in the background, oblivious, raising a drink. Then 10:39, MIA rejoining her group by the fire. The same smile now directed at her friends. Like nothing had happened. Ryan leaned back. The silence around him was immense. Cavernous. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe but exposes. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, trying to summon some logic, some explanation. But logic wasn't helpful when the evidence didn't lie. There was no ambiguity in a timestamp. No room for interpretation in the way her body had curled toward that man like muscle memory. Ryan tried, for a moment, to imagine another version of the story. One where this was a misunderstanding. Where the images were misleading. Where context could somehow rearrange what was now unfolding in his gut. But the truth had no softness left. He clicked further. In a group shot at 10:40, MIA stood with her arms around two bridesmaids. Her hair a little messier. Her cheeks more flushed. She looked like she always had in photos, beautiful. joyful, a woman everyone adored. There was no hint of the shift, no smudge of guilt. He scanned the faces of her friends. None of them were looking toward the photographer. None of them seemed aware. Their laughter captured like a chorus. Blind to the scene they had just missed. The realization chilled him. No one had seen it. Not because it was hidden, but because no one was looking. It was in plain sight. And yet invisible, just like betrayal often is. Ryan rubbed his face with both hands. His palms cold. His coffee had gone untouched. Now lukewarm on the desk beside him. Hours might have passed. Or maybe just minutes. Time felt different now, looser, slower, more dangerous. He opened the group email MIA had sent the night before. A thank you note to the attendees. Full of emojis and exclamation marks. She had written, "Best night of my life. I don't know how I got so lucky to have friends like you. Can't wait to show Ryan the photos." Well, maybe not all of them. Smirk. Ryan stared at that sentence. His heart, already numbed, skipped once. Was that a joke? Or had she known? He would never know. Not really. He closed the email, then the folder. He ejected the USB and set it gently on the desk. Like it might shatter from too much handling. There was nothing left to confront. Nothing to demand. He didn't need a confession. The timestamps had spoken. The camera, that silent witness, had captured something words could never defend. He stood slowly, walked to the kitchen, drank the cold coffee in one gulp. It tasted bitter. There was a time, not long ago, when he would have fought, when he would have called her, demanded the truth, given her a chance to deny it. But now, all he wanted was distance. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. He looked down at the USB drive once more. And in a strange way, he felt grateful. Grateful for the quiet exposure. Grateful that the mask had slipped before the vows. Sometimes, the universe hands you a rupture not as punishment, but as mercy. He turned away. He didn't pack, not yet, but something inside him had already started to leave. And there was no coming back from this kind of clarity. The morning that followed was unusually quiet. No sirens in the distance. No dogs barking in the alley below. Even the neighbors, who usually slammed doors and shouted across the hall, seemed muted, as if the city itself had decided to retreat. Offering Ryan the sacred kind of silence people often search for when making irreversible decisions. He stood in front of his laptop again, the USB drive resting next to it like a weapon never meant to be used. He didn't move right away. The previous night's storm still hung in the air, inside him. At least, not in the form of rage. But something colder, something more precise. Clarity, when it cuts deep enough, doesn't bleed, it crystallizes. He opened his email client. The cursor blinked inside the to field like it, too, was holding its breath. He typed slowly, methodically, the address of the event planning agency first. Then the wedding coordinator who had managed the vendor contracts. And finally, the photography studio, the general contact address, and the direct line of the studio's founder, whom Ryan had met during initial consultations. He remembered the pride in the man's voice when he said, "We don't just shoot events. We preserve moments." Ryan attached the images. Not all of them, just 3. One of MIA on the photographer's lap. One with the timestamp metadata clearly visible. And one from just minutes before, with her laughing beside her bridesmaids. He didn't annotate them. He let the images speak. Then he began to type. To whom it may concern. I am writing with concern regarding a significant breach of professional ethics during the Bachelorette event held on the 12th of this month. Contracted through your studio and coordinated by your team. Please find attached photographic evidence, including file timestamps, that suggest an inappropriate relationship occurred between a contracted photographer and one of the event participants, my fiancée at the time. I am not contacting you in pursuit of retribution, nor do I wish to engage in any legal threats at this time. I am simply asking for a formal internal review of your standards of conduct. And for you to inform me of the measures your organization intends to take in response to this violation. I trusted your team to document a memory. Instead, I received proof of its undoing. Regards, Ryan Caldwell. He read the email 3 times before clicking send. And then it was gone. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft whoosh of the outbox. A digital breath exhaled into the cold efficiency of corporate protocol. He closed the laptop, not out of finality, but necessity. Some part of him knew that if he kept looking at the screen, he might wait for a reply. And this moment was not about replies. He did not message MIA. He did not call. His phone remained silent, face down, because what was there to say? In his mind, MIA had already spoken. Not in words, but in gestures, in proximity, in choices. The camera had caught it. But the betrayal had already happened before the shutter clicked. He sat still for a long time. The kind of stillness that lives inside people who know they've reached the edge of something vast and irreversible. He thought of their first date. The clumsy charm of it. How she spilled wine and laughed so easily. How she'd brushed her hand against his to apologize. And how electric that moment had felt. He thought of the night he proposed. In a quiet park under a canopy of string lights. Her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. The kind of memory that plays like a highlight reel for years. And now, it all felt like watching another couple's story. One he used to believe in. But that belief was gone now. Not because of the photo alone. But because he had seen something more damning. The ease in Mia's eyes. The familiarity in the photographer's touch. There had been no hesitation. No fear of being seen. That was what told Ryan everything he needed to know. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a decision made with quiet comfort. And for that, he needed no confrontation, no apologies, only distance. There was an ache in his chest. Of course. He wasn't made of stone. But it wasn't the pain of losing her. It was the grief of recognizing that the woman he thought he loved had already left him in some emotional sense. Long before he would ever leave her physically. A love that hides behind a lens isn't love at all. It's performance. He stood and walked to the small linen closet where the wedding materials were stored. The box with the ring receipts. The carefully folded guest list. The color swatches for the table settings. The gift boxes they had planned to send to out-of-town guests. One by one, he set them on the hallway floor. Not violently, not ceremonially. Just purposefully, the way you clear space for something new. He didn't cancel the wedding. Not yet. He wouldn't offer her that closure, not in words. He would let her answer the questions when they came. When the vendors called, when guests began to ask why there were no final confirmations. He would leave that space open. Because that was what she had left him. A question without an answer. A ceremony without a bride. And in that void, he would step away. Not to punish her, but to protect the part of himself that still believed in honest love. Because sometimes, the most powerful response is not revenge. It's the absence of permission to continue. No call, no scream, no final goodbye, just one email, and the silence that followed it. Deeper and more eloquent than any closure ever could be. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains, casting pale gold across Mia's bedroom. The world, for a moment, was still wrapped in the illusion of calm. Birds chirped beyond the open window. The scent of fresh linens lingered in the air. And her wedding day was just days away. Or so she thought. She was still in her robe, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling through final RSVP confirmations when her phone buzzed. It was a message from the boutique where her wedding gown had been stored for pickup. Your return has been processed. Refund will be issued in 3 to 5 business days. Thank you for choosing us. MIA froze. The message didn't register at first. She blinked, reread it, then checked the sender to make sure it wasn't some kind of spam. Her heart skipped a beat. Return? She hadn't returned anything. She called the boutique. A soft-voiced assistant answered. Oh, hi, yes, the return was done early this morning. Mr. Caldwell dropped it off himself. Said the wedding was cancelled. The word cancelled landed like a punch to the sternum. Mia's voice wavered. There's been a mistake. But the assistant sounded firm. He had your order number. ID matched. The dress is back in perfect condition. I'm Sorry if something's changed. MIA ended the call without saying goodbye. She stood in the center of the room, phone clutched in both hands, as if the pressure alone could squeeze clarity from confusion. Then came the second call. This time, from the hotel where their reception was to be held. Hi, Ms. Jameson, we just wanted to confirm, Mr. Caldwell hasn't checked in for his block. We've had no communication since his last update. Should we keep the suite reserved or? Her voice cracked. Yes, keep it. I'll call him. But as she hung up, her stomach twisted, because she already knew he wouldn't answer. She dialed him anyway, once, twice, 3 times, straight to voicemail. Her texts remained unread. She messaged Lara, her maid of honor. Have you talked to Ryan? Something's weird. The reply came minutes later. I think you need to talk to him. MIA. He knows. MIA stared at the message. Everything inside her slowed, like the moment right before a car crash, when motion is suspended. Breath catches, and the body braces before the impact even lands. She called 3 more friends. 2 ignored the call, 1 picked up and said, carefully, MIA, I love you, but I don't want to be in the middle of this. In the middle of what? She didn't need to ask. Because the answer came not through conversation, but through collective silence. It was then that her email pinged. 1 new message, sent to all, subject line, regarding the wedding. From Ryan Caldwell. She opened it with trembling hands. I will not be attending the wedding. I invite you to ask MIA why. No other details, no salutation, no sign-off, just that. And the recipients weren't hidden. Every guest, every vendor, her parents, her cousins, her boss. The inbox began to fill immediately. Questions, shock, a few polite condolences, some silence that said everything. MIA dropped the phone. She tried to breathe, but the air felt foreign, thick, like trying to inhale water. Her knees buckled as she sank to the edge of the bed. Heartbeat pounding so loudly it drowned out thought. She rushed to the vanity, grabbed her laptop, opened the folder labeled, Our Day. It was all still there. Every photo, every plan, the slideshow she had made with their baby pictures, set to the song they danced to in the kitchen, the spreadsheet with seating arrangements, the PDF of the program. She clicked through the images. The engagement shoot in autumn, the one where Ryan lifted her up and spun her until she laughed. The one where their foreheads touched, and the world felt like it fit into a single, quiet breath. Now each photo burned. She couldn't delete them. Her hands shook too hard. She opened her phone gallery, scrolled to the recent folder. There it was, the Bachelorette party album. The pool, the sparklers, the laughter, and hidden deep in the timeline, him. The photographer, his arm around her waist. That subtle smirk. Her leaning in, the look on her face too familiar. She wanted to scream, to crawl out of her skin, to take a sponge and scrub the past clean. But some stains aren't loud. Some don't spill, they seep, and she could feel it now, how every moment from that night was tainted. Not just by what she did, but by the ease with which she allowed herself to forget who was waiting at the other end of forever. She curled into herself, pulling a blanket over her legs despite the heat. Her phone kept buzzing, her inbox overflowed, but she didn't move. The silence of the room mocked her, every object a reminder. The bouquet trial arrangement on the counter. The white heels by the mirror. The love letters pinned on the fridge like trophies of a life that had expired. She could not undo the image. She could not silence the guest list. She could not find the version of herself that had said yes to Ryan and meant it fully. The wedding was not postponed, not rescheduled. It was erased, not with thunder, but with an email, and the sound of a dress being returned without a word. The fallout wasn't immediate. That would have been easier, maybe, cleaner. Instead, it came in waves, slow, unrelenting, cruel in its precision. At first, MIA thought she could control it. Contain it, shape the narrative into something digestible. But stories, once released, take on a life of their own, especially the kind that involves scandal, betrayal, and the illusion of perfection shattering in public view. Her phone became a battleground. Texts slowed, then stopped. Threads she had once dominated fell silent. Messages marked, seen, but unanswered. Group chats once filled with emojis, bridesmaid jokes, and vendor recommendations were now graveyards of paused conversations. One by one, the people she had called friends disappeared, not with confrontation, but with silence, a digital ghosting that left no evidence except absence. She checked her Instagram one morning to find she'd lost over 2,000 followers overnight. Notifications had dwindled to nothing. Her most recent posts, photos from the bridal shower, smiling selfies, quotes about love and faith, had become magnets for cryptic comments and passive-aggressive barbs. So much for forever. Hope the camera caught your best angle. Some vows break before they're even spoken. It wasn't just online. Brands she had collaborated with, boutique skincare lines, wedding planners, lifestyle influencers, began quietly removing her tags. Emails that had once offered sponsorships and styled shoot invitations were now replaced by vague apologies. We've decided to go in a different direction. We're restructuring our campaign focus. It's been brought to our attention. She didn't need to read beyond that. She already knew. The wedding industry, despite its soft colors and curated aesthetics, was built on trust, on perception, and Mia's had collapsed like a paper flower in a storm. The story traveled faster than she imagined, not because it had been broadcast publicly, but because it had been whispered privately, shared in DMs, texted in screenshots, murmured over glasses of Prosecco at bridal expos. Did you hear? You won't believe what happened at her bachelorette party. It was just a photo. But that was all it took. One frame, one image of her draped over the lap of the man paid to capture her joy. The timestamp beneath it like a branding iron, proof that it hadn't been a fleeting moment, but a documented truth. The studio, when confronted, tried to distance themselves. The photographer was suspended, later terminated. An apology was issued, corporate and cold. We deeply regret the breach of professional conduct during a private client event. This behavior does not reflect the standards of our studio. They were quick to act, but not quick enough to stop what came after. Because in the end, the photographer's name was not the one on the guest list. Mia's was. And it was hers that became synonymous with betrayal. Hers that appeared in Reddit threads and wedding forums, discussed by strangers as a cautionary tale. They didn't care that she said it was a mistake, that she claimed to be drunk, that she swore it was a misunderstanding. In the age of image, perception is reality, and a single shutter had captured hers unraveling. She tried to post a statement, a long caption, carefully worded. I made a mistake. I was caught in a moment that I now regret more than I can express. The photo that's been circulating doesn't tell the full story. I was intoxicated, emotional, and unaware of the lines I had crossed. I never intended to hurt anyone, especially not Ryan, who deserved better. I ask for compassion, and for space to grow beyond this. The comments were swift and unforgiving. So you did do it. Drunk is not an excuse. Consent goes both ways. If you were unaware of the line, maybe you were always on the wrong side of it. She deleted the post, but it was too late. Screenshots had already been taken. In a world that never forgets, apologies are not erasers, they are admissions. And no one wanted to hear hers. She stopped going out. Every cafe, every boutique felt like a microscope. Even in sunglasses and a cap, she could feel eyes following her, whispering, judging. Some people smiled politely, but there was always a glint behind the civility. Curiosity, maybe, or something darker. A few acquaintances messaged her privately, just checking in, hope you're okay, but even those felt brittle, obligatory, like condolences at a funeral. Her career was on hold, projects suspended, contracts re-evaluated. No one wanted to be associated with that bride. And worst of all, the people she loved most were the ones furthest away. Ryan's parents, who had once welcomed her like family, now refused to take her calls. Her own sister responded to her texts with single-word answers. if at all. And Ryan, she hadn't heard from him since the email. No reply, no closure, just distance, and the echo of a decision made too late. Sometimes, in the quietest hours of night, MIA would sit at the edge of her bed and scroll through old photos. Not of the wedding plans, but of before, long before, the early days, when love was new, and she still believed that loyalty was a given. She'd study her own face, try to find the moment where something shifted, the moment she stopped being the girl who wanted forever, and became the woman who gambled it for a laugh she barely remembered. But it didn't matter, because the world didn't care about her reasons. Only the frame, only the timing, only the look on her face as the camera clicked. And that was enough to ruin everything. Not just her wedding, but her name, her brand, her future. She used to think one mistake couldn't define a person. Now she knew, it only takes one moment, caught on camera, to redefine your entire life. The sun hadn't fully risen yet when MIA opened her laptop. Outside her window, the city breathed quietly, buses not yet roaring, coffee shops still asleep, a hush hanging over everything like the last sigh of a long night. Inside her apartment, the silence was different. It wasn't the weighty kind that had haunted her in the early weeks of scandal, but something gentler, more inquisitive, like the air was waiting to see who she would become next. She clicked open her email out of habit. There were no job offers, no brand inquiries, no apologies. She didn't expect any, but among the newsletters and spam, one subject line stood out: saw your story. Just wanted to say. She hesitated. It was from an unrecognizable address. No profile photo, no signature, just a few lines, typed in a font so simple it felt deliberate. Beautiful memories can be tainted, but no one can steal your ability to love again, unless you stop trusting yourself. That was it. No name, no follow-up, just a message dropped into her morning like a pebble in still water. MIA stared at it. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake. Spam, maybe, but something about the timing, the tone, it felt real, felt earned. She leaned back in her chair. It had been months since the email from Ryan had detonated her world. Since she'd stopped being a name people cheered for and became a name whispered with caution. A reputation once associated with bridal elegance and lifestyle inspiration had been swallowed by a single shutter click. And yet, the click was only the start. The real damage, she had come to understand, wasn't from the lens, it was from everything that followed. The loss of identity, the self-doubt, the collapse of the narrative she'd spent years building. But this stranger, whoever they were, had offered something that had gone missing in all the commentary, all the judgment. Permission. Permission to start again. She got up, walked to the mirror in her bathroom, and stared at the woman who looked back. Her hair was longer now. Darker. She wore less makeup. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes that no concealer could hide. But she looked real. Not curated, not posed, just MIA. For the longest time, she had tried to separate herself from the girl in the photo. The one with her head tilted in too close. The one whose judgment had lapsed. But the truth was, they were the same person. And if she hated that version of herself, she would never be free of her. So she breathed, not deeply, just enough to say, "I'm still here." She sat at her desk again and opened a blank page. No blog post, no brand statement, no attempt to explain or defend. Just words. For herself. She wrote, "I am not who I was. But I am not unworthy because of it." Then another line. "I lost a wedding. I lost a name. I lost a future I thought was guaranteed. But I did not lose my soul." Her fingers moved more confidently now. "I have betrayed. And I have been betrayed. I have been hated. And I have hated myself. But I refuse to carry this shame like a legacy." Outside, light was beginning to bloom along the rooftops. She didn't post what she wrote. She didn't share it. That wasn't the point. This wasn't for redemption. It was for release. She spent the morning cleaning. Not out of panic, not as penance, but because she wanted to start fresh. She boxed up the remnants of the wedding, the unused gifts, the decor samples, The dried bouquet that had once been a centerpiece. She donated most of it. Threw the rest away without ceremony. She didn't cry, not because she didn't care anymore, but because some griefs lose their sharpness. They become like scar tissue, aching only when touched. By noon, she was walking through her neighborhood with a coffee in hand. No disguise, no headphones, just the rhythm of her steps. The city slowly waking beside her. She passed a florist she used to love. And for the first time in months, she walked in, bought a single sunflower, not for an occasion, just because she liked it. When she returned home, she placed it in a jar by the window. And then she stood in front of the mirror again. Not for judgment, but to say goodbye, not to the woman she had been, but to the weight she had carried. I will not let one mistake define the rest of my life, she whispered. And this time, it wasn't a plea, it was a decision. Outside, the light flooded in, and for the first time, she didn't flinch.